10 years ago, I knew nothing about China except for what I heard on TV, read in the newspaper, saw on the internet. And like most people, you have a tendency to believe your government, your newspapers, your TV, CNN, BBC, Toronto Star, whatever it might be. And the first time I went to China, I had expectations of a country that was in poor shape, roads not kept, dirty, beggars on the street, but it was up and coming. It was getting there. Now, go back a few years here. When I was 50, I hadn't been anywhere. I've been to Syracuse, New York, Buffalo, New York, the East Coast to New Brunswick. Other than that, if I couldn't get there in a car, I didn't go. Well, for my 50th birthday, I decided I needed a change. And that change was I deathly afraid of airplanes. I don't like airplanes. Airplanes fall out of the sky. Well, I decided that for my 50th birthday, I was going to get on a plane and I was going to fly to Wales to see my cousin. That was a big step. That was a hell of a flight. That's another story. Maybe one I'll get into later. But that was my first step to seeing the world. Because my world up to that point had been, like I said, the news, CNN, newspapers, internet. And you believe what you see because it's right there. And when it's repeated, this is what the narrative becomes. So fast forward 2 years, and by this time, after my first ever experience on a plane, I'd been to Washington, Tampa Bay, New York City. So now I'd been on a plane a few times. I'd seen a bit more. And things that you hear about and you see in person, they start to be a little different when you actually see it up close and personal for like the first time. So about 10 years ago, a friend of mine, Gerald, he's married to a Chinese woman. And she said to me one day, she said, "I find you a good Chinese wife." I laughed. Gerald said, "Don't laugh," because she means it. So that's another story again. So anyway, she introduced me to a number of Chinese women, and I came across one that I thought, ooh, she's pretty nice. I think I'd want to explore this a little further. But she's in China, and I'm here in Canada. So I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to have to get on a plane. I'm going to have to fly to China for a first date. This is another story. And have a look at that part of the world. Now, my brother had been to Thailand, so I had a little bit of knowledge of Asia, but I had no knowledge of China except for what you see on TV or in the newspapers. And like I said before, it wasn't rosy. Yeah, they basically portrayed it as a third world country, up and coming, but mostly poverty, pollution, dirty, and the people wouldn't talk to you. be careful of the Chinese government. They'll throw you in jail, drop a hat. This is what I had to think about before I got on that plane to go to China. So I got on that plane, and it was a long flight, 13 odd hours, but it didn't end up in China. I ended up in Tokyo, Japan. But when I eventually landed in China, I had these expectations of what I was going to encounter while I was there. Now, when I landed in Japan, I had to go through Tokyo Customs. And when I went through Tokyo Customs, dealing with a foreign language, dealing in a foreign country, by yourself, a novice flyer, hadn't done this kind of thing before in my life. And I had to deal with this. And honestly, it was 2.5 hours of frustration and anger of trying to get through customs. So now I'm going to China from here. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, it's taken me 2.5 hours in a country like Japan. And I went through all of that frustration and all of that, the language barriers, everything else. And now I'm going to communist China. I was petrified, terrified. I'm like, what am I going to get myself into here? So I flew to Guangzhou and we landed. And again, like I said, most everybody on the plane was Chinese. So I had nobody to help me along. So I thought I'd just follow the crowd. So picked up my bags. We get into the main part of the airport where customs is. And I stopped dead in my tracks because it was the most intimidating sight I had ever seen. Every direction, left and right, rows and rows and rows of people trying to go through customs. And I am like shitting myself. Oh my God. So I'm looking, and I'm kind of looking back and forth, and then I noticed almost dead center, there's one English sign. It says foreigners with a big arrow. Oh, I'm a foreigner. That's for me. Okay. So I'm like, great. So I beeline for the foreigner aisle. I get to the foreigner aisle. There's only 2 people in line, me and one other person. I'm going, this is good. So find the person in front of me. They go through. I'm standing there. Now, I tell you, the old hand was doing a little of this because I'm in a foreign country here. So, customs agent behind there says, next. Perfect English. So I walk up there. He says, passport. I hand him my passport. He looks at the passport. He says, can you please look in the camera? Do not smile. I said, okay. So I look in the camera. He says, thank you. Does a few more things. Hits it with a stamp. He looks up at me. He says, your first time in China? Beautiful English. I said, yes, it is. He said, you here for a vacation? I said, yeah, I'm here to see my girlfriend. You have a pleasant stay. Through those doors, please. I'm like, thank you very much. Grab my passport. I walk through the doors. I'm in the airport. From the time I got off the plane till the time I walked into the airport lobby was less than 10 minutes. I spent 2.5 hours in Japan, frustrated, just to no end. I get to China, and boom, I'm in and out of security in 10 minutes. So that's the first thing. So now I'm like, okay, this wasn't too bad. So then I meet Na, and we get on a bus, and I start telling her about the plane ride and things like that. So while I'm driving down the highway on this bus, I'm thinking to myself, the roads are in pretty good shape. So, okay, but we're still on the outskirts. We're a long way away from the city center yet. So, obviously it's going to get worse the closer we get to town. Well, as we got closer to town, it didn't get worse. The traffic got a little heavier, but it didn't get any worse. And then we got into town. And the thing that struck me the most was I had brainwashed, whatever you want to call it. I had been programmed by the media that I was entering a society that was dirty and a little backwards, and that they were coming together, but they hadn't got there yet. So as I'm coming into the city, the first thing I notice is the streets are beautifully clean. And I'm like, wasn't expecting that. Next thing I noticed is there's flowers everywhere. Down the mediums, both sides of the road. It's beautiful. Even on some of the expressways, on the roundabouts and that. Beautiful flowers everywhere. I'm like, this can't be China. This is not what I expected. Like, it's okay. We're not right into town yet. So anyway, we end up at Clifford Estates, which was where she lived, a gated community. This gated community, 120,000 people live in this gated community. I live in Kingston, Ontario. There's only 120,000 in my whole town. This was her gated community. That was a bit of an eye-opener. The gated community, own bus system, own hospital, own police force, restaurants, everything. You never had to leave. Again, it's clean. Everything is beautiful. I'm like, okay. We're still not downtown though. So the next day, we got on another bus and we traveled into the heart of Guangzhou. And we were going down to see some of her friends and to meet some of her friends. And now we're in the heart of Guangzhou, downtown. And it's still beautiful, neat, clean, flowers everywhere, beautifully landscaped. This is not what I'm supposed to be seeing. I'm supposed to be seeing all this poverty. I'm supposed to be seeing people begging on the street. I'm supposed to see dirt, pollution, beautiful blue sky. Okay, well, I'm only here one day, so I really can't judge after one day. Well, by the end of my week, I didn't find any pollution on the streets. I didn't find or see any people begging. I ran into people I didn't know who were very nice to me, extremely nice to me. So I'm at the end of my stay, and I haven't encountered anything that I was told that that China was really like. Now, that was 10 years ago. I've been back to China many times since then. And I've learned along the way that it's not like they say on CNN, BBC, CBS, CBC. There may be bits and pieces here and there. Every country has its moments. Every country has its good points. Every country has its bad points. But some of these other YouTubers that have put some of their rhetoric out there about how bad China is, go see it yourself. Experience it for yourself. I was one of those people. I had no clue. I knew what China was like because I had seen it on TV. I had read it in the newspapers. I had read it on the internet. China wasn't a good place. Then I got there. Changed my mind. Changed my view. I ended up marrying her. And one of the reasons I ended up marrying her is, again, I didn't know too much about the culture and all the rest of it. So I started watching YouTubers to get more insight on what China was really like. One of those YouTubers was Laoway86. That's another story. He was the one that convinced me that I was on the right path and that this was good going forward. Again, that was 10 years ago. He's changed a lot since then. Now, this is my first video. I've tried to start this thing like 4 or 5 times. I've probably made a fool of myself here. But if you enjoyed or liked what I had to say, if I can get 10 subscribers, 10 likes, I'll put another video up. I'll tell you how I met my wife through a Chinese woman who is a matchmaker. Yes, a Chinese matchmaker. I'll tell you how my first date was halfway around the world and I ended up in Japan instead of China. I have a few stories that go along with this. How I got married in China. Yeah, I didn't know I got married. That's a good one. Anyway, if you like this, please subscribe. That's all for now. Take care.